My name is Iris. I'm 46. A high school art teacher by trade, a sculptor by passion. But passion, like everything else, had taken a back seat the past few years. Ever since my marriage dissolved 3 winters ago, life had become about function, bills, parent-teacher conferences, grocery runs. I survived on routine. My son, Mason, was 24. A civil engineering grad who, unlike most of his friends, hadn't moved away after college. He worked remotely for a small firm and still lived at home. Some might call that unusual, but it had become our quiet arrangement. We coexisted. Him in the attic loft he converted into a mini studio, me downstairs, brewing coffee before sunrise. We spoke daily, laughed, shared stories. But there was a strange space between us too, unspoken but not uncomfortable. A rhythm, a knowing. Then one day in late fall, he knocked on my bedroom door with an idea. "I've been hired to redesign an old lakeside cabin," he said. "It's a private commission. Kind of remote. The client wants it rustic, sustainable, and artistically inspired." "That sounds amazing," I said. "I want you to come with me." I blinked. "Come with you?" "To the cabin. Just for the first week. Help me see it differently. Through your eyes. An artist's eyes." I laughed softly. "I'm not sure a 40-something art teacher is what your boss had in mind." He didn't. I did. There was something in his tone. A softness. Almost a question. And so we went. Just the two of us. The cabin stood alone at the edge of a frozen lake, surrounded by pine trees and fog that clung like a secret. No Wi-Fi. No neighbors. Just silence, sawdust, and sketches. By day, we worked side by side, me sketching textures, he measuring beams. He asked about my sculptures, and for the first time in years, I spoke about them like they mattered. By night, we cooked together, shared wine in front of the wood stove, and talked. Really talked. He told me things I hadn't known. That he hated engineering some days. That he almost dropped out once. That he never dated seriously because it always felt like something was missing. I told him I stopped sculpting because I didn't think anyone saw me anymore, not really. That every time I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a woman. I saw a mother. A divorcee. A shell. He looked at me then, not like my son, but like a man seeing someone. And that night something changed. Not a touch. Not a word. Just a look that held everything we didn't know how to say. I never planned on going away that winter. Everything about me, about the life I'd constructed after the divorce, was rooted in stillness. The kind of stillness you wrap around yourself when you've been shaken too many times. Safe. Predictable. Quiet. My house was full of folded laundry and unsent letters to my past self, dreams I'd once had tucked neatly between the pages of old sketchbooks, collecting dust in the attic. I hadn't picked up a piece of clay in over a year. But Mason, as always, saw through it all. He stood in the doorway of my bedroom that evening, holding a mug of tea he'd made for me. Chamomile with honey, the way I liked it. His broad shoulders leaned against the frame, his eyes calm but alive in that soft way he inherited from his father, though he used it differently. Gentler. Less guarded. "I want you to come with me," he repeated, setting the mug on my nightstand. I sat up straighter. "To a construction site?" "To a lakeside cabin," he said. "Technically, yes, it's a site. But it's more than that. It's isolated. Quiet. The client wants it artistic. Something that feels like memory. Like home. That's your world, Mom. Not mine." I stared at him, unsure how to answer. I hadn't been anywhere that wasn't school, the grocery store, or the art supply section of Target in what felt like forever. "Besides," he added, a smile ghosting his lips, "you always said you wanted to try winter by a lake. Snowfall. Wood smoke. Silence." That part was true. I'd sketched that vision 100 times. I just never imagined actually stepping into it. I should have said no. I should have reminded him I had midterms to grade, a parent meeting on Tuesday, an aging cat who didn't like to be alone. But I didn't. I said yes. We left before dawn 2 days later, our SUV packed with gear, drafting supplies, Mason's laptop, a toolbox, and, at his insistence, my old sketch pad. The highway unraveled like ribbon beneath the tires, the city lights fading in the rearview mirror as the landscape gave way to pine and frost. Mason played music from his phone, mostly instrumental, soft piano layered with crackling vinyl. It was the kind of soundtrack you'd expect from someone older, someone who appreciated stillness. It made me want to close my eyes and lean into the window, feel the hum of the road beneath my skin. He didn't talk much, but he didn't have to. I watched his profile as he drove, jaw set, eyes steady, the same little crease between his brows he used to get when he was focused as a boy building Lego towers. Now, he built cabins, designed entire spaces that might outlive both of us. We arrived just as the snow began to fall. The cabin stood alone at the edge of a frozen lake, its roof thick with untouched snow. The windows were wide and blank, still waiting to be framed. Inside, the scent of pine boards and fresh drywall lingered in the air. There was no cell signal. No noise but the wind and the creak of trees swaying. Mason unlocked the door with a quiet welcome home, his breath curling in the cold. We stepped inside. The space was raw, exposed beams, plywood floors, a wood stove in the center that looked like it hadn't been lit in years. But it had good bones. Light spilled in through the temporary plastic coverings, soft and blue with the sky. We spent the first day unpacking, organizing supplies, lighting the stove, and settling into what would be our shared space for the next week. Mason had claimed the upstairs loft. I had the downstairs room with a view of the lake, frozen and vast like a dream left unfinished. That night, after dinner, canned soup, warmed on the stove, we sat on the floor by the fire, our feet in thick wool socks, our hands wrapped around mismatched mugs. He leaned back against the stone hearth and watched the flames dance. "I think this place could be beautiful," he said softly, "but not without you." I blinked at him. "What do you mean?" "You see things I don't. You feel things. I build for function. You build for feeling." I looked into the fire, my heart thudding gently. He shifted slightly, facing me. "When was the last time you made something?" I didn't answer right away. "Not for work," he added. "Not for a student. For yourself." I exhaled slowly. "I don't remember." He reached for something behind him, a rolled-up blueprint. Then from beneath it, my old sketch pad. "You should start again." I looked at it. The worn cover. The smudge of graphite on the edge. A version of myself I'd almost forgotten. "I'm too rusty." "You're not," he said. "You're just waiting for the right space." His words landed somewhere between a compliment and something else. Something warmer. More intimate. He smiled then, eyes holding mine a moment longer than they needed to. And that's when I felt it. A flicker. Soft. Dangerous. Familiar. Something shifting between us, like heat rising where it shouldn't. Something that had been waiting quietly. The next morning, I woke to silence, not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels whole. The fire had gone out during the night, leaving the cabin cool, but not cold. I pulled on my thick sweater and padded barefoot into the kitchen, where a pot of coffee was already brewing on the gas burner. Mason stood at the window, his frame outlined against the pale morning light. "You always wake this early?" I asked, my voice still soft with sleep. He turned, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Only when it's quiet enough to hear the snow fall." It was a strange thing to say, but beautiful. He handed me a mug, our fingers brushing briefly. I don't know why my hand lingered, but his didn't pull away, either. We spent the day working side by side. Mason traced structural outlines with mechanical precision while I wandered the unfinished rooms, sketchpad in hand, letting my fingers remember what it felt like to draw for no one but myself. It came back slowly, line after hesitant line, memory poured into motion. In the afternoon, the snow thickened, settling across the frozen lake like powdered sugar. Mason brought out a small speaker, and the cabin filled with gentle jazz, the saxophone echoing softly against bare beams and unfinished walls. At one point, I passed behind him while he bent over his blueprints, and he leaned back slightly, just enough that my hand brushed his shoulder. He didn't flinch. Instead, he looked up at me with that same quiet warmth I'd begun to recognize, not maternal, not casual. Something else. Something private. "You're relaxed today," he said, his eyes still following mine. "I think it's the air," I replied. "Or maybe the silence." He smiled again, but didn't speak. That night, after another simple meal and a shared bottle of wine, we sat in front of a fire again. Only this time, closer. The loft ladder creaked above us, the kettle whispered from the stove, but between us, there was only a slow, growing tension. Not sharp, not dangerous, just aware. Mason sat beside me on the thick rug, knees bent, elbow resting against mine as we watched the fire crackle. "I used to imagine this," he said, voice low. "Not the job, not the cabin, just this. You and me. Somewhere far away. Nothing expected of us. No one asking questions." I turned to look at him. His face was angled toward the flames, but his voice trembled just enough to betray the stillness. I swallowed. "Why?" He hesitated. Then, slowly, "Because I think I was always waiting for the chance to see you like this." Unrushed. Undivided. My breath caught in my chest. He looked at me then, not past me, not around me. Directly. Eyes soft, pupils wide in the firelight. And something unspoken passed between us, like standing at the edge of something vast and warm and forbidden. My pulse jumped. "I don't think I know how to be seen anymore," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't speak. Instead, he reached out, slowly, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered at the edge of my cheek. I should have moved. I should have looked away. But I didn't. Instead, I closed my eyes and stayed still. I don't remember who moved first. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was him. Or maybe it was the firelight itself, drawing us closer like gravity, slow and warm and inevitable. We sat in silence, our bodies just barely touching, and it felt louder than any words we could have spoken. Mason's fingers still rested lightly against my cheek, and I hadn't opened my eyes yet. I was afraid that if I did, the moment might break. That whatever tethered us here, in this fragile quiet, would vanish. But then I felt it, his forehead gently resting against mine. Soft, hesitant, full of breath. And I exhaled. My hand found its way to his arm, solid beneath my palm, warm through the thin fabric of his sleeve. I let it linger, let it move slowly. Up, down. A quiet rhythm, not asking, just knowing. His other hand came to rest on my knee, thumb grazing the edge of my wool leggings. He didn't speak. Neither did I. There was no need for explanation. This wasn't a plan. This wasn't the product of impulse or wine or loneliness. This was years of orbiting. And suddenly, we weren't orbiting anymore. He shifted, just enough to pull me gently into his arms. And I went. I folded into him, like I had belonged there all along. We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in silence, wrapped in each other. My head rested against his chest, his breath steady against my hair. He held me like something precious, like something he didn't know if he deserved but couldn't bear to let go of. His hand moved slowly along my back, drawing patterns I didn't try to name. My fingers curled into the hem of his shirt, grounding myself in something real, something impossibly tender. No rush. No need to speak. We just held on. At some point, his fingers brushed my jaw again, lifting my chin. I met his eyes. And everything I'd tried not to feel all these years, every flicker of pride, every unspoken ache, every quiet moment I'd mistaken as parental devotion, rose up like a tide I could no longer hold back.
He leaned in, and I didn't stop him.
Our lips met gently, tentatively, like we were testing a language we both already knew. It wasn't hungry. It wasn't urgent. It was reverent, like a prayer whispered between two people who hadn't realized how long they'd been waiting to be heard. My hand slid up to his neck, his skin warm beneath my palm. He sighed softly into the kiss, and I felt it echo in my chest. Something in me trembled, not from fear, but from recognition. This wasn't new. This had always been there, hidden in the quiet mornings, in shared glances, in the care we gave each other without question. He pulled back just a little, eyes searching mine. "Is this okay?" he whispered. I could barely speak, so I nodded. And then, for the first time in what felt like years, I smiled. "It's more than okay," I said. The world outside the cabin faded, snow falling softly against the windows, the wind whispering through the trees like a lullaby only nature could hum. Inside, the fire had burned low, but the warmth between us had only grown. Mason still held me close, his hand brushing slow circles along my spine. I felt the steady rise and fall of his breath against my cheek, and for a long moment, we didn't move. We didn't need to. His fingers were gentle, slow, exploratory, like he was learning a map he'd once drawn from memory and now rediscovered with reverence. I tilted my face toward him, and our lips met again. This time, the kiss was deeper, more certain. My heart beat faster, but it wasn't from fear. It was from feeling seen, truly seen. I wrapped my arms around his shoulders, my palms resting against the warmth of his back. He leaned into me slowly, our bodies aligning in a way that felt both natural and impossibly delicate. There was no rush, no urgency, only the quiet unfolding of something that had waited far too long to surface. His forehead pressed to mine as we paused, our breaths mingling in the hush. "I didn't know how much I needed this," he said, his voice low, rough around the edges. "Neither did I whispered, fingers sliding gently up the nape of his neck. We moved together without a script, like artists working on instinct, each gesture a brushstroke, each sigh a kind of music. We didn't speak. We let our bodies do the listening. His touch was thoughtful, present. Every glance, every breath between us carried weight, intention. And when he held me, I didn't feel older. I didn't feel broken. I felt like a woman he had chosen. We stayed close for what felt like hours, the fire casting soft shadows on the wooden walls. Our movements remained slow, suspended in that tender gravity where the rest of the world cannot reach. At one point, he laid back, pulling me with him, cradling me as though I were the center of some secret he'd never dared speak aloud. And maybe I was. Maybe we both were. Eventually, the fire died down to glowing embers, and the cold began to creep in at the edges of the room. Mason pulled a wool blanket over us, cocooning our shared warmth, and I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady thrum of his heart beneath my ear. Neither of us tried to explain what had just happened. Neither of us needed to. We drifted into sleep like that, curled into each other, the past stripped away, the silence no longer something to fear, but something that held us together.